of the biggest challenges that I think I've gone through, and even Nick as the managing director over the last 6 to 9 months, is that you're constantly redefining yourself through organisational growth. Exactly that. You from day zero to day one, you're wearing every hat under the sun. You're doing sales, you're doing marketing, you're managing your own HR, you're doing your own potential legal work. There's so many elements to a business that's your identity.
Welcome to the podcast, brother.
Thanks for having me. It's interesting times. Warm weather outside, but I'm excited, so thank you.
Coming in the summer, how good is it?
Well, you took me out on the deck before, and we were planning to shoot out there, so...
Well, I reckon next time we will.
Absolutely.
A few beers.
Barbecue going?
That's actually what we want to do. We want to bring a Barbie in. Barbie, a few drinks on a Friday.
Get to know the real Jordan.
Creative juices. You'll get some real creative juices there, that's for sure. That's when you'll get the gold.
Awesome, brother. So we've obviously got some things that we want to talk about today that me and you have had conversations about behind the scenes, which I'm really, really excited about. This is the first episode of the new podcast. So we've obviously been doing podcasts previously, but what we've started to do is now shift into having the Investors podcast. And now this is going to be the first episode of our new business podcast, which is called 0 to 1. And basically, we're just trying to have conversations around business that are going to make an impact on those listening, on helping them take their idea from 0 to 1. So special, very special. But what I might get you to do, brother, is introduce yourself and tell everyone a little bit about, I guess we'll start with your journey, man.
Definitely. So, like most people, finished school, graduated year 12. There was no real clarity on direction. I did get into a Bachelor of Geology, deferred that, and got an opportunity to go and work up in Queensland in the mines that is, and try and make some money. And like most people listening, wanted to put that money to good use. So for me, it was I finished up in the mines. The natural assumption when you've got a small deposit is buy your first home. So that's the direction I headed in. And as a part of that process, I looked to use a mortgage broker, and that really inspired me to go down that career path. Because as I finished the mines, I was contemplating, do I become a stockbroker? I'd been trading shares for a number of years, and it was just a natural interest of mine. But through the process of buying a home, I got attracted to that idea of helping people and a little bit more customer facing and customer centric, somewhat of a sales role. So pursued the opportunity of becoming a mortgage broker and jumped online, worked out what educational requirements I had to go through and started acquiring those. And I came back from the mines, started working on the education piece of it all, and I didn't work for 6 months because I didn't need to. So I took time out and enjoyed myself and spent time with family and friends. And then from there it was, okay, it's time to get a job. You're 19. Let's start pursuing what you really wanted to. And for me, it was just trawling seek. It got to a point where I wouldn't say I was desperate, but I was looking for a while, and I'm like, I really, really want to get into the workforce now and start sinking my teeth into a career. So one afternoon, ended up applying for a job for where I'm at now. It was about 6 weeks old, and at that point in time, managing director Nick would always just run an ad on Seek, and at this time it was for a mortgage broker role, a sales role, and from his perspective, when you're looking, you won't necessarily find, but if you keep that ad constantly open, you don't know what's going to come across your desk. So who applies for a Seek ad that's 6 weeks old? Not many people, and for whatever reason I decided to because of where I was at in my life, and got me in, and it was crazy. During that interview, I was so sick. I hadn't, the night before, 2 nights before, younger sister wanted to get some takeout and got probably the worst dose of food poisoning in my life, and I was in a terrible way, but I thought, this is an interview, got to rock up. I was in the interview, suit, tie, everything in between, just sweat, like literally drenched.
Like the Michael Jordan flu game, just have to play through.
Literally, sweating bullets. So got through. As I said, he wasn't necessarily hiring, but he always just likes to meet people and try and find the right people for the business. And luckily enough, there was someone on the outer, and he got subbed out, I got subbed in, and essentially just started in an admin operations type basic role, and sat in that for a number of years. And I just have a natural knack, or what we developed and what we found, a natural knack for operations, processes and systems and execution. So as I became more competent in that role, I started to take on more and more responsibility within the business. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, so, you're doing all this at quite a young age, right? So, because, I wasn't doing any of that stuff at 19. I don't want anyone to know what I was doing at 19, because
we all know.
Yeah, well, it wasn't that, right? I can give you the tip. So, I guess my question around that is like, was that something that had come from your parents? You said that you went to the mines at 18.
You're investing at a young age as well. Not many people that age are getting into it.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely my father. I think it's just crazy. You don't know what you pick up. But I can really, a very, very vivid memories. I probably was like 10 or 12, and like Dad's father taught him about buying shares and long-term value investing, and then he naturally acquired that. And my earliest memories sitting in a caravan park down at Inverloch, which is the east coast of Victoria near Wilson's Prom, Phillip Island. And every day the Herald Sun, there'd be, I think like the ASX 200 or whatever, and all the individual companies within that, and just looking at price shifts in the companies and clearly not acknowledging or not appreciating what I was looking at that time, but just understanding the fundamentals and the shift in how a company the value on a day-to-day basis, of course, can fluctuate depending on market conditions and everything. So that's probably the earliest memory. I can attest to it, but for him it was, of course, go and buy a house, and probably a similar story to what most young Australians do receive. But I think because I'd heard it for such a long time, directly or indirectly, it was just formed part of the DNA basically. And
did you actually go through with buying a house after coming back from the mine? Oh, you did?
Yeah.
So do you remember that first process? I imagine it would have been
It was interesting.
Yeah.
It's I ended up buying. It ended up just being a house and land package down the southeast, which in the end, considering what's going on, has actually performed pretty well over the last 7-8 years or something now. But yeah, it was super, super daunting. It was just great. It gave you that perspective shift to being on both sides of the fence. And it's like anything, as you're a professional, if you haven't experienced it yourself, how can you truly give potentially advice or reassurance or be empathetic towards what the individual on the other side of the transaction is going through? So,
what was it in that process that made you want to get into it? Was it something like, was there an issue with the process? Like, was there something inherently wrong with it that you thought, I want to get in this and actually do better? Or was it streamlined and it worked efficiently and it just something that excited you?
I think it just excited me for the fact of a good mortgage broker not only delivers the transaction, but will sit with you and talk through your goals. Okay, well, this is transaction today, but what does the future look like? How are you going to execute that? How are you going to buy that second house, third house, fourth house? How do you build that portfolio? And I think that's the part that really interested me, the wealth aspect and the accumulation of wealth and growth. So it was just those types of conversations that interested me. And then the process, of course, I've never really done sales prior to that or even necessarily acknowledged what sales truly was, but I think that part in the client interaction and then just the relationship piece really had an impact as well. So I think it was just the end-to-end experience. There's just so many elements of that experience that resonated with me and that I felt I enjoyed. So yeah, it forced me to inquire. And interestingly, in our industry, I think the statistic is 35 to 40% of people that become a mortgage broker do so off the back of using one and going through the process and the experience. Yeah. So it's either that or it's within the family line basically. So it's very interesting that, I was a statistic in that instance, and but it is a common scenario where people do fall into it somewhat. So yeah.
So fast forward to like, what is it, 21, 22? You're obviously in the admin and operations role.
Yep, exactly right. So I was in that role for 3 to 4 years, and as the managing director, Nick Riley, absolute legend, as he continued to grow the business and remove himself out of the day-to-day, I was just the kind of natural succession plan to continue to acquire those responsibilities and duties. And it was something that I did really enjoy, and luckily I did okay at as well. So it was just a natural fit, and Nick necessarily wasn't looking for a succession plan at that point in time, and not to say he's exiting at any point in time, but he needed to find someone that could come in and really execute on the operational standpoint of the business. And for him, he continued to identify, as we were talking about before, as he was really good at relationships, going and acquiring them and maintaining them and deepening them to a further level, and just business strategy and, okay, well, how are we going to grow to that next level? So for me, it was just super, super natural to come in and fill in the blanks and fill in the gaps in a lot of senses and free him up from not wasting his time, but just, as we know, it's in business, it's where's your time best spent? And is your time best spent going and acquiring another client or doing the bookkeeping, or is it best spent doing the marketing or putting a new strategy doc together? So for him, it was, okay, well, where's my time best spent? And then everything in between then basically started falling onto me. So through that process, I just continued to acquire a lot of business acumen and knowledge, which of course I'm still acquiring to this day as I continue to take more and more responsibility off him. Through that process as well, the sales side of things interested me. So I did run or operate a dual role there for a while. So I did full-time in the operations type business management position, and then I was a mortgage broker or finance broker for about 2 years as well. So I did that after hours because the money was good, and it just exposed me to more from first of all customer relations standpoint, a sales standpoint, and then the money standpoint as well, which was super beneficial. And then eventually reached the tipping point where we identified as a business and as an organisation we needed a dedicated general manager, which my role was fundamentally created. And then I did continue to do sales and that for a very brief time, and then it was just too much. Your head's here and here, and you're just getting torn constantly. And when it comes to sales, as we know, you've got to drop everything at the click of a finger when it's required. So it was just way too much disruption. And then the interesting thing was, once I then started to solely focus on that, of course, you're really honing in on that role. That then took things exponentially to the next level as well, because it had my undivided attention. So, and that's really where we are today. I think really in my role, the shift has been continually, it's that trajectory of Nick just becoming higher and higher and higher level, and he's very entrepreneurial in his thinking, and then for me, I'm coming in with the data and the numbers and the ratios and the fundamentals that the numbers tell us off the back of the financials and the conversions and everything in between, to then either validate his ideas or give him more information to then fuel the fire to then, okay, well, what's the next element or what's the next evolution of our overall strategy? So the combination works exceptionally well. And then luckily enough, 2 years ago, same thing, apologies for jumping into the timeline here a little bit, but 2 years ago we were lucky enough to have somewhat of a business mentor join our business as Director of Sales, Martin Vidicovic. So he also, through his wisdom and his prior experiences of buying and selling multiple businesses, just added another element that both I didn't have through a lack of wisdom and experience, and Nick didn't have because it was his first business and he'd been in it for 10 to 12 years, and Marty just added kind of that third dimension that we realised we were missing. And that's why over the last 2 years, or 2 to 3 years, we've pretty much hit 30 to 40% year-on-year growth from an overall revenue standpoint and a profitability standpoint. Yeah, since, what was it, 2018 or something along those lines. So it's we feel like we've really started to hit that flywheel effect, and Marty's...
Jim.
Exactly right. The flywheel's really starting to kick. So for us... it's Marty brought in not just the sales element, but he's also been a business mentor. He after buying and selling businesses in between, he decided to start a podcast and be a business mentor as well on the side. And he added so many different elements to our organisation that we probably didn't have. And along with the sales aspect, as I said, the flywheel of the culture and the values and the vision and the people. And one of his big mantras and what he really enjoys is breaking people through their ceiling and taking them to that next level. So it's been incredible, and for me personally, and just as a group, he's had a huge impact.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, you mentioned something before about kind of, I guess, getting people into their role, and the role that they're passionate about and where they can thrive, and just how important that is to the overarching business actually having success, because like you said, you're in a hybrid role, and I feel like getting a business from 0 to 1, often you have to go through those hybrid roles, but the goal is obviously to get everyone into their individual role really thriving, and then just providing the environment that and kind of building the culture that's going to carry that business and allow people to self-actualize in their roles as well.
Absolutely. And as we were touching on, that's been one of the biggest challenges that I think I've gone through, and even Nick as the managing director over the last 6 to 9 months, is that you're constantly redefining yourself through organisational growth. Exactly that. You from day 0 to day 1, you're wearing every hat under the sun. You're doing sales, you're doing marketing, you're managing your own HR, you're doing your own potential legal work. There's so many elements to a business that's your identity. And for a long time, you are probably the primary revenue driver. And for me, it was the transition of, okay, well, I'm not generating revenue for the business anymore. I'm managing the business, and for me, it wasn't necessarily numbers on a bit of paper that could immediately reflect my impact. So it's, you know what, I feel like I'm turning up every day, and I feel as though I'm working really hard, and I'm having great conversations, but where can I tangibly see my impact on the business? So especially for someone who really enjoys that part, that's their identity. And when you take away, okay, well, you're not bringing in revenue anymore, it's all right, well, what are you doing? How are you actually having impact? And people do struggle with that identity crisis. So you've got to have the resilience to take a step back and take yourself kind of out of the picture and say, okay, well, what is it that I'm doing? How am I adding value? Yes, it's not a dollar base, but okay, have I helped this person achieve better targets for themselves? Have I improved this process, which means our efficiencies here have increased? So they might not necessarily on paper reflect, but you acknowledging that, okay, well, you are having an impact on the business because the overall fundamentals and the metrics and the numbers are saying over a 6, 12 quarterly basis, biannual basis, annual basis, look, all in your key areas you're responsible for, all the numbers are trending in the right direction. So, and talking about Nick, same thing as I've touched on with my growth. Nick's always been the CFO of the business, and that's something that I've indirectly somewhat taken over the last 3 months. And for him, it was, okay, well, that was a primary piece of identity that he had for 14 years in business. And just taking a step back, the business has been around for 14 years, and the business has had a lot of growth, and we've really only defined our current strategy and identity over the last couple of years. And as I said, during that time, Nick's maintained that CFO role. So for me, being the general manager, it's natural that I manage the finances and keep tabs on everything. And that was something that he'd always done. And for him, it was really letting go and somewhat not losing control, but having to trust another person that they're going to take care of it. And okay, well, that time he'd allocated to doing that job, what do I do now? And okay, well, how can I have impact? Because I've got spare time, not necessarily spare time, but I've got more time to allocate in other areas, and yeah. So
CFOs hate to lose control over that too. So
it's the dichotomy of individualism versus what's best for the company, right? Because that's one of the hardest things. Is like, I want to self-actualize, right? And I want to improve upon myself, and I want to develop myself. But what's best for the company isn't always the results that I'm generating, right? So this is something that I think you always go through when you move from the technician and you start to have to, you start looking at building a team, and something that we're experiencing now is like growing pains. It's like figuring out your processes and systems. How much responsibility do you give to those around you? What's the right amount? It's really like, especially as an owner or a CEO or someone in a particular role, it's like, sometimes you've got to be willing to go through those growing pains, even though at the time they feel like, like, why are we making mistakes? Why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? But really, that's just a part of the process, so.
Definitely. And I think, and you can never put a number to this, but you can't replicate yourself. If you could, happy days, everyone would be in a happy business, you'd hope. But you can't replicate yourself. So how can you accomplish and achieve what you want to a certain percentage that you'd expect yourself? And there's one aspect that says you should expect perfection 100% of the time, no matter who's doing it. But then you also need to be realistic because of growth pains, and people have different drivers as to why they're in the roles. So do you accept, okay, well, as long as someone can do this role at 80% of what I'd expect myself to, is that an acceptable level? Or do I expect 90% or do I expect 100%? And through different conversations, that's where people struggle to grow businesses is if you set the bar too high, you're constantly going to lose people because people feel as though they're never going to be good enough and they're not going to have that level of engagement. So it's striking the balance of, okay, well, I'm happy to put up with a mistake, and you can't put a tangible number to this, but I'm happy for this person to make a mistake once a month, once a week, or if they can do the role at 80 to 90% capacity and effectiveness and efficiencies as to why I do it, then that's an acceptable level. So it's understanding, as you've said, it's the growth pain, the pain of growing, and you can't replicate yourself. So how can somebody do that and take those duties off you, but understanding that the reason they're in that role might be slightly different to you as an owner, and even coming to terms with that, it's why is someone in your business? What's their purpose for being there? And okay, well, if you're in a growth phase, you really don't want people within your organisation that are there just for a job, just to earn a paycheck. They've really got to be buying into what you're trying to achieve as an organisation. So you as a business owner, it's very hard. And I made the shift, apologies for jumping all over the shop here, but my mind's ticking. So I made a shift from being an employee to being a partner and a shareholder over the last 4 or 5 years, right? So even the shift in your mentality is, okay, well, as an employer, you want every dollar in your pocket. Whereas for me now, I want every dollar in the business's pocket. And coming to terms with that, there's people in businesses that or employees that get the opportunities to buy in that can never make that mental switch, and they're always They're always in a state of conflict because who am I trying to prioritize here? I'm trying to prioritize myself, or am I trying to prioritize the business? And it ultimately comes to, it unwinds some people, and we've had an instance in the business where someone was conflicted on the day-to-day, and it resulted in one having, a fork in the road, and a decision had to be made, and we as a group made that decision, and everyone's better off for it now. But it was just an interesting experience to go through that. If down the track you do have someone in your business that is an employee that you do want to say, hey, I want to let this person buy in, and 5%, and because we know it's that blue sky, it's that dangling the carrot, and I've grown this business for 2 or 3 years, and my 2RC, if they leave, I'm stuffed. Like the proprietary knowledge, the IP, just the trust that I've got in them to replicate that is going to take potentially years. So that's often a natural progression for someone to get that opportunity to buy in, but are they the right person to buy in? Are they going to have that mental shift when they do buy in? So luckily for me, I was able, and it took me a year. Like it took me a year to really think, okay, well, for me, it's going to have to pay off in the long run. Like for every business owner, it's how many dollars does a business owner reinvest? Did you take distributions? No, I didn't. I reinvested. And you might not realize some profitability for 5 years. And for an employee to come to terms with that, it can be a big shift. And same thing, it took me 12 months initially, but even still up until recently, it's probably been a bit of a challenge, whereas now I get it. And, it's potentially, it could be an exit or it could be a variety of different things, but that's when your payday hopefully comes.
Have you had anyone guiding you to be able to make that transition and to shift your mindset from being the employee to an owner?
No, not really. I think for me, no, I don't. I don't, and I don't know how I did it. I think it was because you become a shareholder, you're in the management meetings, you're having more of those high-level discussions. I think I just understood the bigger picture, and it just took time because I went through the motions and I went through the journey, and when you understand, as an employee, you don't necessarily understand the risks and the commitment and the dedication and the hours that the business owner has put in. And once you get an appreciation for all the effort and the time and the thought that they've gone through to get the business to that point, I think for me, it was just that realization of this person sacrificed a lot. So for me, it's just understanding, okay, well, that's what it takes. That's the sacrifice to get to the business to where it is. And I can't be, and I've got to acknowledge that, okay, well, I'm dedicating my life to the business, not myself anymore. So it's.
How much do you think culture and values plays into that though? Like, because everything you're talking about, right? Like there's, I'm guessing that there would have been a particular, like, it's the culture that got you over the line, right? It's like you seeing Nick, you seeing what these guys do, the culture they building, the values they live by, because I often think about it like, within a company, there's a certain, like, there has to be a certain culture there for that to be the belief system, and only once you get the company to that point where everyone's 100% bought in, everyone's 100% in alignment with those values, can you actually start to really push that company to where it needs to go to achieve the company vision, So like, how much do you think culture played in that, like, because you're saying, like, what you were saying is, like, there was like a point where it kind of started to shift. I was wondering how much culture played into that.
Culture for us is the most significant piece because, and I'm going to answer that two ways. We as an organisation over 14 years have only had one individual leave, and that was recently. And we have 40 employees, so we've had people being with the business pretty much day dot from an employee or a contractor standpoint. So the culture and the leadership and the comfort that Nick really gave to the group it has taken us to where we are. And for me, like, it's having confidence in him as a leader and making the right decisions. So you're right, culture that he's really indirectly developed, because for Nick, he's a very intuitive person. So he didn't sit down and say, this is how I want to lead, this is how I want to act. For him, it comes natural, and people are gravitated toward him because he gives people such confidence and such respect and everything in between. So I think for me, it was, when you're an employee, you are out for yourself and you're always protecting your best interests. So I think you're right, culture had a huge aspect because it's me putting my belief and trust in him, and I already had that, but it's really taking that to that next level. So that's my first answer on culture. You're right, I've never even thought about it like that, but that would have been a huge aspect, because if I didn't trust him and I didn't trust what we were doing and I didn't trust what we were creating, maybe I could never have taken that internal shift and taken that internal leap. That's a great point. Awesome point. And our culture has been one of my greatest challenges as me defining myself as a leader and becoming a leader within the group, because when the bar is so high, I naturally need to first of all, maintain what he's been able to implement and accomplish from a culture and a leadership standpoint, which for me, I'm naturally a blunt person and naturally very direct. Like, it's, for me, there's no fluff. It's, here's how we get there. Let's get it done. So for me, as we know, there's all different types of personalities. So sometimes that leadership approach works for some people and work for others. So if I was to maintain on that trajectory, I would have got half the group offside and half the group onside. So
that's easily one of the toughest things in business. Like, it's without a doubt one of the toughest things, because I reckon it's such a grey area, right? Because it's personality orientated. So, like, you have to really learn about your people. You have to really invest in them and start to understand them, and be able to, as a leader, in kind of have the self-awareness around what needs to happen right now. Like, we were talking with Al about this, right? Like, when do you have that hard conversation? When do you pull back and you kind of have to let that person, make that decision for themselves? Like, it's fucking difficult, man.
It is. And I've spoken to Holly about this, and she said, your personality has got, the way I act and my personality's got me to where I am. So I can't redefine and try and change who I am, because it's helped me achieve and accomplish what I have. But it's how do you build on what you've got, and the self-awareness is a big piece. And even I just don't think self-awareness, the actual phrase and the theory and the idea itself is commonly known. It's uncommonly known. Like, if there was more awareness about self-awareness, it in theory should help people be that little bit more inquisitive and look to go through that process of self-discovery. And talking about emotional intelligence, as you know, there's 4 layers or 4 elements or 4 layers to emotional intelligence, and even layer 1 is self-awareness, and even that in itself will make you just such a better leader, because you're exactly right. And talking about being the technician to the leader, it's Same thing, your personality and for me, it was my hunger and my directness and my ability to execute got me to where I was, but that wasn't going to help me to the next level and help me to the next level. So it ties into that redefining of yourself, and whether that's not necessarily redefining, it's just growth, internal growth through self-awareness, and then understanding who you are and how you would naturally react to situations or circumstances, and then how can then you influence other people and get the best out of them as well. So definitely, it's very important.
It sounds like you've done the work. You know, like most people tend to, like, they become aware of self-awareness and that they want to improve themselves and that sort of thing. But then after time, they naturally default back to who they are, you know, because they don't want to do the work in order to get there. Whereas it sounds like you, over a course of the time, you've really put in that work in order to progress to this person where you are today, where you can start to drive that culture and reflect your leadership style on the group within your business too.
I think the work also is who you are. That's who you become, right? It's kind of like, you know, and I reckon one of the hardest things is like, you know, you got to think about what it's, within business, you're moving from the technician to the manager to the leader, and then, you know, obviously to the entrepreneur, and that's kind of the journey. So, you know, Nick took that step and you kind of took that step at the same time, and that's how a company really grows, right? But I think one of the hardest things is like, once you go from, like, as a technician, you rely so heavily on discipline. And you're so, you know, that's where you build that directness. You know what I mean? It's like, well, there's no bullshit with yourself. Like, you know, if you want to become good at something, it's you and you, brother. Like, it's, you know, you're in it with yourself. And if you bullshit yourself, you don't get anywhere, right? And then all of a sudden, you go into the manager role, and it's like, you can't just, like, with the conversations you would have with yourself, you can't have them with other people, because that is not you anymore.
All eyes are on you.
Yeah, and it's kind of, but it's more like, well, I want to get the best out of this person. Maybe this conversation, or the conversation I would have with myself, isn't the conversation that's going to get the best out of this person. And you know, that's one thing, like, you know, when we get someone like Tobes in, right, or we get someone like Al in, and even yourself, who are in these roles, right, it's like you start to kind of hear the communication side of it, and it's like you know, we've talked about this, you know, you go through this identity shift, and I remember, like, you know, the first couple of employees, and it's kind of like, and you know, you're battling these kind of struggles all the time. Like, this is not just something that, you know, it's always in front of you. Always that next moment. But, you know, like, you kind of like, and Al said this as well, it's like you're leaning into a relationship, or you're leaning into a situation, and it's not coming back, or you're not getting that kind of feedback that you're looking for. It's not that perfection kind of, or how you play it out in your head. Like, I'll say this, he'll say this, we'll hug, it'll be fucking happy days, right? But it's, and then what happens is like, well, no, that didn't happen. This is not how things are meant to be playing out. And, you know, I think that's one of the, you know, on an individual level, they're the conversations you have with yourself at night. You know what I mean?
Forces you to take that step back, doesn't it? And reflect on what may influence you, may not influence somebody else, and you need to really be empathetic towards that other person.
Yeah, and personally as well. Like, I think there's that side of it, but then there's also the other side, and you kind of have that battle with yourself. Or like, what am I doing wrong? You know, what do I have to work on? These are kind of conversations you constantly have with yourself.
And that's, I can't remember where I read it, whether it was in a book or it could have just been on LinkedIn, but my leadership approach and management style is, if someone makes a mistake, I've made the mistake. So, of course, it'll come to a point where the onus is on the individual, but have I given them the right support or training to execute? Have I got sufficient or adequate processes or systems? Have I communicated my expectations accurately? So, for me, it's, I'm the first person to put my hand up, and it doesn't matter who you are in whatever role. You could be part of our international team, or you could be on shore here, or could be in sales, could be in admin, could be in marketing, whatever. But if you make a mistake, I've failed. That's my approach. And if I have failed, how can I best support you so that you can do that role better or accurately next time, or whatever the situation is? So I think, sorry.
No, you go.
And that has helped me give the team confidence, because it's there's no blame game. It's not you versus me. It's not I'm dictating you and I'm managing you and you're underperforming. It's all right. Well, we've both collectively made this error. I've had no involvement factually, but high level, I haven't given you the tools to do that correctly or adequately. And for me, even at the moment, talking about managing people, like underperformance is a big aspect, and we look to develop, and we've got a very high performance culture, but you've always got people that will fluctuate in and out of performance, and it's identifying, okay, well, why? Do they have external distractions based on, what's going on circumstantially at the moment? Have we introduced a new process that they weren't adequately trained on? Through growth, are we feeling the pressures on one of our processes that used to work that didn't? They're driving factors as to why they work. Are they there and they want to leave because they're disengaged? Or do they just want to get their paycheck and go home, and they're not going to go that extra 10 or 20% in those circumstances? So for me, it's, managing performance and communicating with people, and you're right, it's connecting with them on their level and trying to identify and pinpoint their gaps. And a lot of the time people don't know why they've made a mistake or why they're potentially underperforming. So it's taking them on that journey to identify it, and you helping them, of course, indirectly helps yourself as well.
How do you, because there was a few different, there's some like different language there, right? There was like the ones where it's like, okay, we need to work on our processes, we need to work on our systems. And then there's also the ones where it's like, well, maybe it is a performance thing, maybe it is or an investment thing, to the company. Like what's the process that you take there to be able to identify that, and what are the steps that you take after that?
It's a great question. And
because that would be hands down, someone listening, the number one thing they struggle with is because that's, as a young leader, your leadership skills are purely based on how well you can identify that situation.
Well, and talk about corporatization of the group and me maturing it from a corporate standpoint, I'm super fortunate. That's something that comes to me naturally, and I'll still give an answer, but just giving some context. Like, that's something that comes to me naturally. I can look at a situation or a circumstance or a data set or just information in general, and I've got a really good ability to process it and then come out with an idea or a theory or try and really diagnose what potentially has gone wrong or gone right in that instance. And I think through my personal development and understanding corporate lingo and knowledge, and as we've grown as a business, there's a variety of different root cause analysis techniques, and one of the really good ones is the 5 whys. So it's, what's the primary issue or what's gone wrong? And then you're asking yourself, okay, well, why did that occur? And then whatever your answer is to that, okay, well, then why did that occur? And it doesn't necessarily need to be 5 times. It could be 2 or 3 times, but it really cuts through the top level noise and gets you to that root cause of, okay, well, why did that fundamentally occur? Why did that actually eventuate? And then if you address that issue, that really has a massive impact. But for me, this would be all business owners, my mind just constantly ticks with it. It's constantly just consuming information and thinking, okay, well, was that the right outcome or the wrong outcome? And if it was the wrong outcome, how do I amend it? And if it was the right outcome, how do I replicate it?
You're forced to make decisions really quickly and move on from those decisions too.
Yeah, 100%.
The thing that I'm learning is the same thing learning about other people. Different people have different skill sets. So another thing that I'm coming to terms with is what I expect of myself and how I consume knowledge and how I act and how I would make a decision isn't how somebody else does it. And talking about right person, right role, I'm clearly naturally a good fit for the role that I'm in. Find
people who complement the skills that you lack, or your weaknesses.
Exactly right. And okay, well, where do I fit in this large ecosystem? And then you've got your Nick, you've got your Marty, you've got your Caden, and they all play their chess piece in the big chess game. But finding that is one of the biggest challenges, and that was going to be one of the other aspects I was going to talk about is recruitment. Like for us, we've recruited incredibly well over the last 18 months, directly, indirectly. And the realization I've come to is and this will sound very stupid, but the importance of recruiting the right person.
Oh, yeah.
The cost of getting the wrong person could be not just dollar figures, but time. And as we know, that's the number one finite resource. So for us, how do you recruit good people? And it ties back to the vision and the values. And for us, one of the great things Marty introduced 2 years ago was our values code, and that was a collective organisation development of that. And that's how we govern ourselves. It's like an internal law and internal governance. It's that accountability that everyone holds each other to, and that has been a massive impact when it comes to recruitment, because if people don't align with those somewhat naturally, then it's very hard to change personalities and habits and everything in between. So that's really helped us identify who we do and don't want.
What are some of the questions you might ask someone in an interview in order to sort of suss out whether they're going to be a right cultural fit for you?
Great question. It really depends on the role. But I think for us, it's understanding what are their coming back to what are their internal drivers, right? And if you're a growth business, you want someone with growth drivers. So coming back to someone with understanding initially that, first of all, just the natural stuff around their history, but what are their drivers? Why did they apply? What is it about the business that really excites them? And for me, like we've an international team in the Philippines and Malaysia, and we've got a team here as well, and ask everyone the same questions. And it's because it doesn't matter who you are or where you're geographically based. You've got to align with their organisation. And so for me, as I said, it's what's your drivers? Why did you apply? What about our business resonated with you? And someone, there might be instances where they're just sucking up and they've just studied the website. But if someone really resonates with the website and that's the reason why they've applied, like a recent hire that we had, I just hired a guy that in the operations team leader role, he took a job with us for $30,000 less than other job offers he had, because he applied, and our job was that ad was at the top of his list because he looked at the website, he looked at the values, he looked at how we conduct ourselves online, and that social proofing, and it really resonated and connected with him. And it's been a week and a half, and I'm over the moon. So I think for that, it's understanding what's someone's driver. And for him, he wanted to be a part of something. He didn't want to just rock up, and he really wanted to have an impact. And he loves the hustle of small to medium business. And he'd come from a business that had been bought out by a publicly listed group. And that's why he left, because it was that culture and that purpose was somewhat left in that instances. So
it's intent, right? Like it's always intent. Like, number one rule is you hire on intent. And that's usually because you can teach skills, but intent that's something that's personality orientated. So whatever that intent is, it has to align with the company. But intent's always the hardest thing to find. This whole conversation comes back to, is everyone in the business trying to drive the growth of the business? And if the answer is no, you're going to struggle.
That's a competitive advantage over the large institutions as well, the ones that you're competing against. Because it's so hard once you have 50,000 employees to drive a culture where you're pushing that business further. Whereas within a boutique, you can really get that going, can't you?
You kind of, and I guess that's why you probably have so much respect for like some of the bigger companies like the Apples and these kind of things, because more than anything, they've probably just been able to maintain that culture and that drive more than any other company, So companies get to a certain point and then, maybe some of them stall, but like, Apple doesn't stall, like Tesla hasn't stalled, like there's these companies that have, and it's not that they're all the same. They've actually probably all got very different cultures, but everyone within that believes in that vision, believes in that culture, aligns with that. And that's what ends up, you've probably seen this now is, that's what attracts people to go work to these. That's what, where you start to become what Prof calls it is an accelerant, where you don't have to worry about putting up CCADs and these kind of things because people are coming to you, And I think, that's something that, from just this conversation, you can start to pick up. And if you're talking about taking your company from 0 to 1, you've got to have the right people.
And to that point, that's an internal discussion we've had over the last 6 months is, your workforce is your sales force and your referral force. And it's exactly that. It's in the group within the company tell their friends, and then they want to come and work for you. And it's building that reputation. And you're exactly right. You want it to come to a point where your brand speaks for itself, and the way your employee value proposition speaks for itself. And we're luckily enough, talking about the flywheel, that's something we're starting to feel over the last 6 months as well, is people we've hired are telling their friends, and luckily there's still a lot that has to go along with it. You can have a friend that you might want to join your business, but they've got to meet the culture. They've got to make sure that they fit with everything else. And we've just hired someone in a sales role that's a high performer as well, and that came from an internal referral. So for us, it's like it just gives you that layer of validation to think, all right, it's what we're doing is working. We're doing something right here, because as we all know in business, sometimes you trial so many things and you might not get noise, positive or negative, and you're just thinking, is this having an impact? And for us, it's all right. We think we do all the right things when it comes to the employees, and we think like we've got a really sound vision. And that just gave us that little boost of confidence to think, yes, if someone's happy to refer their friend and recommend they come and work here, then we're on the right track. So, yeah, it's a great point, definitely.
All right, what we might do, Andy, we might jump into quickfire, I reckon, and chuck a few questions at you.
Beautiful.
But the whole idea with this is, short, impactful bits of content.
I've been talking a lot. No, sorry.
No, it's good, man. Like it was an insightful conversation. Like, I mean, it's probably more so for me than anything. I'm the long-winded one, right? I'm Andy's not a fan.
He haunts my dreams.
He's the poor bugger who has to go away and create all the content.
Yeah, listen to it on work.
Yeah. Andy hates me, by the way, because it's like, imagine how much of my voice he's had to hear up until this point.
Too much.
All right, we're going to dive into these.
Yeah.
Let's have a reset.
All right, so one piece of advice for young business leaders out there.
It's just personal development. It's understanding, okay, well, what do you want to be as a leader? I think that's probably the first piece of the puzzle. And personal development, as we know, can come in so many different formats. But for me, it was just, okay, well, what do I want to accomplish and what skill sets do I need to accomplish that? So for me, it's go out and gain mentors, work out what you need to learn. And for me, I didn't necessarily have a bookkeeping background or a financial analysis background. But I want to be a general manager, and that's a key part of the role and the duty and as being a leader. So I had to go and acquire that knowledge. And as we know, we can do that through books, through courses, through different businesses that can support that. So for me, it's upskilling yourself in the key areas that you know that are required. And you may not know the areas that are required, but it's talking to people that have potentially accomplished what you want to accomplish and understanding what they needed from a skill set perspective to accomplish what they had.
Yeah, it's Jim Rohn, right? Jim Rohn's book and his kind of thing. You're a sum of the 5 people you spend your time around. So that's definitely something that I resonate with. I've been really lucky to have some mentors in my life that have just completely transformed it and continuously helping me become the person I want. So as a young leader, your self-development that's your bread and butter. That's the kind of non-negotiable.
Yeah, and as you've said, it's doing the work, not just learning it, but okay, well, how are you implementing it? How are you constantly evolving it? And one of the cool things that I've really come to terms with recently is you might learn an idea, but where you're at in your journey, it doesn't necessarily click, right? But if you can come back to it at some point in time, it's like if you watch a movie for a second time, you notice something you didn't notice before. And with that personal development journey, I think that happens quite a bit, because I was on your Instagram this morning and I went through a post, the Elite Business School Instagram, and I looked at a post that was probably 2 months old, and it was, what are the 3 key metrics that you should be managing in your business? And one of them was cost of acquisition, and we call it something different. And talking about my growth, I've named that metric, but for us it's personalised to our business. But at the end of the day, from a corporate standpoint, if an insider looking in, it's cost of acquisition of client and leads. So I learned something this morning, but it's, if I hadn't gone and learnt that initial piece of the puzzle, I couldn't then liken that terminology to what we've gone through and what I've had to learn in the initial instance.
And that's the acumen, right? That's the acumen you collect when you do invest in yourself and you do the courses and you do gain that understanding.
Definitely.
What has the most influence in a business success, and why?
It's the same answer I'm assuming everyone gives. It's people and culture. Like the intent. Why is everyone there? Why does everyone rock up every day? That has the biggest influence. You can have a great strategy and you can have a great process and you have great technology, but the ability to execute is the single most handily important element of a business's success. And one of the main integral parts of execution is the intent of the individual behind the execution. So, it comes back to the intent and why is somebody there and working for you.
Just once, I want someone to come on and say, "It's me."
Yeah.
It'll never happen. Just like
That's Braden's answer.
Yeah, literally. All right, next one. 3 words to describe a great leader and why.
Fierce, understanding, and resilient.
That's spot on. But okay, so I want to come back to that. So why fierce? Why understanding? They're sometimes two separate things, right? So what do those words mean to you, and why do you think they're the ones?
Fierce is how do you keep coming back day in, day out? It's fierce in your ambition and your intent and your drive. It's having the internal driver to say, I'm rocking up every day no matter what. So it's just fierce in the way you operate and how you conduct yourself on a day-to-day basis. And then understanding or empathetic, you could probably put another spin on it. It ties into that people piece. It's understanding that you aren't the only individual within your business. So you've got to understand everyone within your business to maximise and get the most out of them, and understand the intent of why they're there and make sure that aligns to the business's success.
spot on.
Next question is life advice for your younger self.
I've definitely, like we all have. I reckon I did have had a similar journey to you, but I've blown a lot of money. So I think for me, life advice is don't blow as much money and invest as soon as possible.
Yeah, that's definitely the truth.
That's what my whole podcast is about.
Literally, right?
Like, coming back to the mines, it's, yes, I use majority of the deposit, but to buy a house, but I still didn't work for 6 months and I had a great time.
I still think, though, that
You need to do that.
I don't think it's as negative as what people make out that it is, because you learn so much through making those mistakes.
And some of those times are your best memories.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're never going to get that back, especially when you're in your young 20s,
Nah.
Get out there and enjoy yourself.
Like I was a fuck up, right?
Yeah.
But I had so much fun. Like there's still memories I look back on now and I go, I'm just glad I got to go through those and experience those and the friendships you build.
What would that mean to you, though? If you were able to go back and change that, why would you want to change that?
I wouldn't change what I did. I would change what I did with my money. I think what I agree we've all been through, it teaches you street smarts. Like you can really identify the difference between someone that's got street smarts, and how do you define street smarts is very difficult. But someone in business with street smarts and someone in business without street smarts, they've just got a different edge and they've just got the ability to read and understand people, I feel, a little bit better.
It's relationships.
It's
relationships, and the give and take and the knowing, there's always like one person, right, that that just like doesn't know how to read the situation. Like they either just say something they shouldn't say, or they're so outspoken and they can't read that situation. I think that's what you get from you don't learn that just being in a business, because everyone's so formal, but when, maybe it's like, I'm trying to think of an example, like when you're younger and your mate's just broken up with his missus or something, right? And it's kind of like, okay, well, I'm not going to crack this joke today, maybe day 8, you know what I mean? Like, but it's those kind of things, I guess, that when you start to build that like what you were saying,
those are the 3
smarts.
traits that make you the leader. Like it allows you to build that empathy and understanding of other people. Without that, you'd probably be a terrible leader, or you'd need to bring somebody in to fulfill that role.
Yeah.
Instead of having to do it yourself.
But yeah, straight smarts and the ability to develop and maintain relationships, I think, is a big element. But in terms of the money piece, it's just financial freedom sooner and the ability to make choices sooner, ultimately.
So what does that mean to you? What does financial freedom mean to you?
What's interesting, like for me, of course, the definition for most people, it's the ability to make a choice, and you're not bound by where you live geographically. You're not bound by a specific employer, or there's no money limitations on your decisions. So it's not, I want to go on a 250 foot super yacht. Like, for me, that's irrelevant. It's just the ability to have freedom and choices.
Yeah, 100%.
But interestingly, as everyone keeps coming back to those that have reached that financial freedom, and I follow like the FIRE movement pretty closely as well. It just gives you the ability to do what you want and fulfill your purpose as well. So it's just more fulfillment, which ties back to money and choices and everything in between. So luckily for me, like, as you can tell, I'm super passionate. Like, I feel fulfilled every day, and I feel super lucky to do what I do. And like, I've been with Inovayt 8 years, and I get up and get excited every single day. Every day is a challenge, and there's not one day I think I hate being
Already
here.
reached that financial freedom then.
So yeah, that's probably the two answers of it. But
Next question.
Yeah.
That's it, is it?
Is it?
Must be.
Yeah, there it is.
Beautiful.
Quick fire.
That's
Finished.
good. That was a quick hour.
It goes quickly. That's the thing with
Super
podcasting. It goes really quickly. That's kind of what I was saying to you. You know, like, it's kind of flowy. You know, you just, once you're in the flow state, you kind of get away with it. Awesome, mate. I want to say a massive thank you for coming on the show. So much value there. I think yourself, keep doing what you're doing, brother, because, you know, you're leading from the front. Not just for your company, but, you know, for everyone else out there as well. I might get you to give yourself a little bit of a plug. Where can people find you? Where can people maybe give you the company a plug as well?
Definitely. So the company's called Inovayt, Inovayt. So
Hey, how good's this guy? Didn't plug himself first.
Business.
I'm nothing.
Business.
It's all a business. So Inovayt, Inovayt. So Facebook, website, Instagram. And me personally, Jordan Morieson, as I'm sure it'll probably cover off in the intro.
You'll be big
as
on
well,
Twitter,
so.
surely.
No, Twitter. I'm not too active on social media, to be honest. So if you want to connect with me through the business, email address is there, mobile phone number's there, and if anyone just wants any help or just wants to have a chat, open to talking and chewing the fat, as I like to call it. So yeah, reach out.
Epic. So good.
All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you guys on the other side.
Thank you.
Cheers.